And I just wanted to introduce Toby Hough to the stage again. I keep calling it a stage. I'm just going to carry on calling it a stage. Who was on the panel earlier. He works at HiBob and is responsible for scaling organizational culture, engagement, and leadership capability. In this talk, Toby explores whether HR professionals really do need to be more data literate. So, welcome, Toby.
Onto the stage. Oh yeah, I'll have the clicker, thanks. So it's the graveyard shift. You all didn't want to come back. You had your lunch. I know you're sleepy. It was a katsu curry or something. So have a mint if you're worried about that. There's loads in the bag. So thank you for the intro. And I think we might need to zhuzh you all up a little bit if it's sleepy after lunch. So before we go any further, I'd actually like you to just raise your hand at a couple of questions. How many of you are working on an initiative at the moment, a program where you feel you are convinced it's really valuable for the business, but you're worried that you're not getting the buy-in or the belief from some of your business stakeholders? Raise your hand, yeah? Okay. There's a decent number of you, that's right. Some of you not, that's good. Either because you're not doing any programs, or because you've got the buy-in, which is more exciting. And also, raise your hand if you've heard in a talk recently, or read, or been told HR needs to be more data fluent, literate, capable. You know, insert your word here. How many of us have been hearing that? Okay. Well, I'm going to challenge that a little bit today. I don't know if we need to be. I've got a different take on this. And maybe some of it is just to sort of justify my own existence. Because when I was a boy, I was not a maths kid. I was languages and literature and the arts and music. And I studied languages at university. And I thought I'd be in the Foreign Office, and I'd be a diplomat, and I thought I'd be an ambassador by now with a knighthood. But I failed to get into the civil service fast stream. So I have left that dream to die. So instead, I'm just trying to keep you all awake. So instead, I went, that is true though, I went instead to work at a Big Four consulting firm, where the dream really was, because I really had no exposure to business. So I thought, if this is the world I'm going to go into, then I'm going to go into this. And I went into that world, and I really liked it. And I moved from there to technology implementation, and I started leading a team of implementation managers, and I found I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed how what we were delivering was unlocking value in our clients' business, and I also enjoyed how what we were doing was adding revenue to our own company, and we were seeing this company grow. So I kind of found, despite that beginning, thinking I'd be a diplomat by now, drinking pina coladas on a beach somewhere, with other diplomats, I was enjoying this track instead. And that, in a way, was where I then started to make my move into HR, because what started to fascinate me was how you could see exponential impact from your teams when you were creating those environments for people to thrive, and to follow a lot of what we've been talking about earlier on this morning. And an opportunity opened up, and I was given the chance to move into a people leadership position as the head of people and culture for this particular company in their Europe region. And the chief people officer at the time was very inspiring, amazing woman, and very data-driven. She's quite tough, knows her numbers, and because that wasn't my background, I remember in one of our first interactions, she came over from California and said, so tell me, been in the role 90 days, what are your observations? What's going on? And I did have some observations. I had some real concerns about the culture in one of our teams, and I prefaced everything I said to her with, I don't have the data on this yet, and it's just a feeling now, and but I'll go and get the numbers, and I'll do all my. And she said, look, I want to stop you. I wanted you in my department because you have amazing people instinct. You see things that other people miss. Your antennae for cultural shifts is strong. Trust your judgment because I do. It's good enough. And that was quite an important moment for me, and it stuck with me because I would argue that we've been sold a bit of a myth right now. I think we've been told that to be taken seriously as HR, we need to speak the language of numbers. And yes, metrics do matter, of course they do, but here's the truth. Some of our most powerful insights don't come from what we count. They come from what we hear and feel and understand. And that's what we do in HR. We see that system, the patterns, we see what's not said. And I realized that my job wasn't to be a data analyst for the CPO. It was to be an interpreter, a translator of the operating system. We are that expert as HR professionals. We're close to the humans, we're close to the friction. We see when leadership is leading change that is not sticking. We see when culture and trust is breaking down. But often those insights that we have and the actions that we want to drive for them don't always land. And it's not because they're not accurate. Think back to them, those of you that put your hand up to say you're driving a program and it isn't landing or it's not getting the buy-in. It's not because it's not accurate. It's because somehow it can be viewed as subjective. And my question to us today is that because we're framing it in a way that isn't driving action? We have to translate what we see. We have to test it against subjective data and turn it into commercial impact. And that's a little bit about what we're going to discuss today. Not to become amateur data scientists, but to become really effective translators of what we are seeing and the value that we are bringing. So today's talk is not about dashboards and beautiful data, which we can get you from Bob, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. It's about influence. So IBM's CHRO, Diana Gerson, or previous one, said recently that HR leaders of today will define how work gets done for the next generation. And in 2025, broadly speaking, CEOs are concerned about things like growth, productivity, AI transformation. That's where our focus needs to be as well. And so to do this, we need the courage to view ourselves really as leaders in strategic enablers of business performance. The last 5 years have been really wild. Like, let's take a little bit of I won't say the P word, but there's been other things too. Hypergrowth, mass layoffs, wars, political chaos. And then alongside that, week on week, AI is shaping and reshaping and causing a lot of combination of panic to action to everything in between. But the AI piece is probably one of the best levers that we can have in this area if we use it correctly. So P&G, Procter & Gamble, did a recent study. They said that teams using an AI assistant effectively have been able to double their output. It's the same as basically hiring another person on the team. It's an amazing opportunity, but it's also a challenge. Bain have done some studies. They say 40% of companies that are trying to scale generative AI, only 40% are succeeding. So of all the companies that are trying to do it, only 40% are succeeding. And this is where it gets exciting. The differentiator, so that those companies where they are succeeding is where they are involving HR. And I think that's really cool. Here's the paradox. The more AI you use, the more human your business needs to be. Because the things that we need to galvanize people around are where our expertise come in. Building new capabilities, building a culture around experimentation rather than a culture of fear, helping to redesign roles and fostering a positivity around it. So this is really a moment that matters for us. And it's also, more crucially, I think, something that can help us get more impact from the incredible insights that we're gaining, not necessarily through things that we're purely counting. So Dave Ulrich, it was always nice to quote him, right? He's good to quote him. He says, HR's job is to create market value. I really love that. And we should have said that on the panel earlier. That's kind of something that really stuck with me. And so in an era of the volatility that we're seeing now, our first duty is to make sure that the company is in good commercial shape. That's where we get recognized and that's where we have impact. And he gave a really neat example in a podcast episode recently. This is Dave Ulrich still, comparing Coke versus Pepsi. Who here prefers Coke to Pepsi? Who doesn't like either of them? That was just to see if you were listening. It's irrelevant for this. I just wanted to see if you were listening. So do you know that shareholders are constantly willing to pay more for Coke shares than Pepsi? And when you look at the reason why in Ulrich's research, it's for things like brand value, leadership quality, innovation, talent, culture, customer loyalty. These are not soft skills. These are enterprise value drivers. They are lead indicators of business performance. And guess what? They're stuff that HR directly shapes. That, I think, is pretty exciting. And when we work backwards from that point, we start really talking the language of the business. But we have to ask ourselves as HR professionals, who are we here to serve? And the answer is not initially our people. It is eventually. But I would argue that it's customers, it's stakeholders, it's shareholders, investors, partners, it's the market. Because if we're not serving that, then there isn't a business to employ anybody by. So we have to start there. So ask yourself questions like, what do our customers really value in this business? Not HR's customers, the customers of the business. What do they really value? What differentiates? And then we start speaking the language of the business. I'd love to ask, I promise I won't keep doing shows of hands, but who here feels that they are quite an empathetic person, or they're quite good at practicing empathy? Yeah, well, good, that's good. Me too. One of the things that really struck me as I've gone up my career, I felt that that's one of my superpowers too. But very often, if I look in the mirror, that's been directed downwards within the business. It's been directed to people that report to me or peers of mine. And there's this weird kind of bar when it comes to C-level leadership or the board. I don't think about that. And more as I get exposure to working with our C-level, and you're in the room where it's all happening, I started to realize how little empathy I'd ever really had for a CEO, for example. Understanding the pressures, the accountability, the trade-offs, the tough choices that they're having to make. And I realized if I really wanted to get stuff done that I cared about, then I needed to show empathy there first for those tough decisions, for the pressures that they were under, the pressure that the board was putting them on. I needed to be solving the top 3 problems that they were trying to solve that was being pushed at them from those critical external areas. Businesses, I mean, it's a generalization, but they're caring about growth, speed, profitability, customer satisfaction, so we must do that as well. We need to lean into really co-owning these metrics so that people think we have skin in the game as well and that we want to see the same success as them. So then we can shift from delivering programs to solving business problems, from reporting HR metrics to telling stories with insight that link people performance directly to commercial outcomes. And we can stop talking about things like engagement and culture, but rather how are we enabling growth, how are we mitigating risk, and how are we maximizing ROI. I think that's how we stop sounding like a support function and how we start being more of a strategic one. And it doesn't lie in counting loads of numbers and being really data fluent. So let's give some examples and have a bit of fun with this. I think how we know this is the case because I asked you at the start, you know that there's a program that you really believe in. You are fully behind it. You think we absolutely need this. The business really needs this. I've spotted a problem. I've got good judgment. And yet people aren't taking it seriously. They're saying, okay, sure, yeah, but so what? So what? Or, yeah, that sounds nice. Let's do it sometime. Or, yeah, we should do that. Anyway, back to the other conversation over here. Any number of those sorts of things that come out of it. And I think, again, it's because perhaps when we're presenting those, we're presenting the problem that we see that's very obvious to us. We have an engagement problem here. We have a culture problem here. We have a trust problem here. I'm not dismissing those issues. They're not soft. They are actually profitability accelerators if you frame it right. And that's where the magic happens. So I'm going to share my favorite hack from the sort of soft and gentle to the hard hitting with a little hack. Instead of saying, so what, let's start saying, so that. So before you start making a case for an initiative or a program, look outside in. What commercial outcome are you looking to impact? And if you use the so that, I think it can really help with the commercial framing. And if we look at a couple of examples, we'll see this. So one that jumps to mind for me is around the path to being fully functioning in your role, the path to productivity. So if we look at our sales team at HiBob, I know, roughly what kind of time how long it's sort of taking people. We expect people to be fully productive. We have a ramp period, and then after 9 months, they're meant to be meeting their full number and fully productive at that point. But we also know from satisfaction surveys that 70% of people are saying, hey, it could be better. Like the onboarding could be better. It could be helping me a bit more. So I can go to the business and say, we need to improve onboarding because people are saying it's not that great. 70% are saying it's not as good as it could be. And that's going to get there. Okay, sure, if that's what you want to do, go and do that, and we'll worry about delivering the numbers. Or we frame it differently. We say we need to improve onboarding so that we reduce our ramp time by 20%. By the way, that's 1 million in second half revenue. And those numbers, this is a an example case here, but those numbers are not really complex to generate. And also, just as the business expects to partner with us when it comes to people-related challenges, we can also partner with other parts of the business when we need the numbers. I think sometimes we're not very good at asking for help from those other functions. FP&A, the finance team, they've become my best friends with this now. Help me understand exactly where we are now. Help me understand what would happen if we solve these problems, which I think could decrease that ramp time by a couple of months. What revenue impact would that have? And here's the example that comes up. So you have that conversation with your leadership and say, so I need you to get behind this new onboarding program. Are you in? They say, yes, hell yes, I'm in, if you're going to be able to deliver that for me. That's suddenly no longer a people program, but instead it's a way of unlocking revenue. Another one, retention, and thinking a little bit about often we think about retention through something like the cost of acquisition. And it's really expensive to hire people. It takes ages. It's the impact of not having them there in the business when you're looking for that person. And, we know that that's a pain point. Again, I think it's one of those feelings that we as HR professionals pick up on very quickly. And then also think about that thing. You've invested in the ramp, you've invested in the manager onboarding them, and just when they're starting to hit their stride, they leave. Maybe not as much as they used to, based on some of the data that we were seeing today, which is good. Or maybe they don't leave, maybe they quietly quit. Maybe they drift off into the background and think, I'm not enjoying this anymore. And that isn't just a people problem, it's a productivity loss. Most break-even points are around 6 to 12 months depending on specifically on the role. So after that point, if we use the sales rep perspective again, after that break-even point, it's all upside. So again, if you are retaining people beyond that break-even point, let's say that currently it's 3 months beyond with your average tenure, and you want to invest in some programs that you think will help retention by another 2, 3, 4, 5 months, whatever it is, we can frame that so easily in commercial terms, and that's where it gets, I think, really exciting. So we're saying, hey, you know what? We can impact positively our AR FTE ratio, our productivity per headcount by 10%. If we do that, then this is the value that it's going to bring. So these, again, are not difficult numbers. They're not actually kind of, spreadsheets with tons of data. It's a little bit in terms of how we're framing with that magical so that. And that's going to help get attention from the business, enthusiasm in getting behind the programs. And here's something else. Gartner teaches us that that CFOs, so if you're a CFO, apparently 10% of them will remember a pure stat. 25% if that stat comes with a visual, and 75% if it's a visual and a story. Good news for HR, because we're good at stories. And what did Brené Brown tell us? Who knows Brené Brown here? If I mention her yet, normally doesn't need any introduction. Brené Brown says, stories are data with a soul. I absolutely love that quote. And for those of you that don't know Brené Brown, she's a qualitative researcher grounded in grounded theory research. And she doesn't start with a theory, she starts with interviews and stories, and then she builds insights from what people are actually saying. And I think that sounds pretty familiar today in the life of an HR professional. Every one-to-one, every check-in, every exit interview, every coffee chat, every pulse survey, we are collecting those moments. And it's so much more than just, a nice conversation or a feeling that came out of it. You're starting to create this emotional map of the business. And the really exciting thing is it's going to give us leading indicators about some of the potential future commercial challenges that our business will face if these really start to become systemic problems across the business. And this is also where the AI piece becomes so exciting. I know we often think about it as a threat, but the more that we can put those raw notes from one-to-ones and from exit interviews and from coffee chats into AI, it starts to tell us, hey, we're seeing a pattern here. And if you think about being in a team of business partners, I have 5 business partners that work for me across the Europe region. If we start feeding the same AI with all of it, we start to see whether we have a trend that is across the entire Europe region, if it's a challenge in one particular jurisdiction, and what we need to do on the back of it. So actually, I think that's massively exciting because it's taking, just as Brené Brown talks about, these stories, and it's becoming our data. It's not becoming data in somebody else's view, and it's the data that we are uniquely positioned and skilled at gathering in ways that other parts of the organization are not. And the great thing as well I'm not a neuroscientist, but the reason that the stat on the previous slide came up there is that our brain reacts when it hears a story that is moved by. So if you know that there is a problem, because we see it, systemically across the board, if you start to track the business impact of that problem, and then you drop in a soundbite at the end and you say, by the way, I was talking to somebody last week and this was their experience that day. That's what was going on because we were missing this capability in our leadership training, and just leave that one there as well. Then not only are you getting the number that sticks, but you're also getting that emotional response as well. So if you were to draw a map of everything that we're talking about here, I think this is kind of really what it's all about. We do need to understand the business pain, and for that we need to understand, with empathy, what is that CEO being put under pressure on in that boardroom? What are the three things? Is it growth, profitability, and AI transformation, or is it something else? But what is it? What's the business pain? What are the insights that we are hearing every day in a way that we're uniquely positioned to hear that is linked to that is potentially impacting it? What's the human story as well that you can just drop in that says, and by the way, here's all of the trends, and this is from 3 months worth of interviews with the team in what we do really well each day, and here's a story that I remember from last week. Then you start to get the buy-in for the action. And once you've done it once, twice, 3 times with a leader, they start trusting you from the outset. So, all of these steps, they become a little bit redundant, and that's where it gets really exciting. So what can you do tomorrow coming out the back of this? I would really challenge you all to pick one initiative that you're working on right now and reframe it with something like growth, speed, profitability. If you need to, partner with a commercial peer in finance or RevOps or something like that to understand what you see as the pain point, what commercial impact that pain point is having. Then bring in the data that you are experts at bringing in from your pulse, your exit surveys, your coffee chats, your one-to-ones, and see where you're seeing that trend also crop up in those areas. Share that story in a moment that matters. And I think that is a really important pivot point. It's the start of rather than it from not being heard or being seen as a support function, it's when you really start to be seen as a strategic force. I had a situation in the Netherlands. I was sharing this story earlier. We have, who here has operated in the Netherlands or looked after teams there? A few hands. So if I talk about sick leave in the Netherlands, you'll know what I mean. 70% pay for 2 years. When you've got revenue generating roles there and someone signed off on sick, it's a real problem. And I know that sounds a bit cold, but framing it as a business problem, it really is. We had at one point 5 people out of a team of 38 on long-term sick leave. And our VP of sales for the region said, we need to solve this, we need a policy. And I said, no, we don't, we need manager enablement. We need to galvanize all of the leaders in the office around that. And I promise you, if we can do that, then we'll really start to see this shift. But we framed that whole program. I said, I need time. He said, my managers don't have time when they're covering an IC quota right now. And I said, yes, but I still need them to come and do this course where we're going to train them through it. And he agreed to it because I said, if we can really make this work and we can even reduce just one person off long-term sick, it's going to pay for itself. Now we have one person on long-term sick and they're not a quota carrier. And I don't think it's a coincidence. It came from that program. So even if the business comes to us and says there's a need, we can still challenge them back and say, yeah, but let's really talk about the commercial impact of doing that even better. So we are not the support function. We are the systems translator. And if I were to summarize this, I would say, that feedback that I received from the chief people officer way back then, what did she say to me? She said, you see things that other people miss. Your antennae for cultural shifts are strong. Please trust your judgment. In our efforts to be strategic and data-driven, we mustn't lose faith in our gut instinct that has attracted us into this discipline in the first place. Our job is not to become amateur data scientists in ways that other functions are great. Our job is to draw a through line from what we see and feel and hear to the quantitative data and the commercial results, not as amateur data scientists, but as strategic translators. We're that bridge. And I think that's the way that we can live up to what Diana Gerson is saying about, the future of work is being built right now. We can make sure that we're leading it and not following it. So I hope that's given you pause for thought. Thank you for listening.